Hello, everyone. Today, we will understand how Bob helps us integrate Maximo with the OMS system. For this demo, we have considered a simple use case. When an emergency work order is created in Maximo, a technician may require materials to resolve the issue. To ensure that technicians always have the necessary materials available, maintaining proper inventory balances is extremely important in asset management operations. How can we achieve this? We do it through OMS. OMS is an order management system that receives material requests from Maximo whenever required items are identified. OMS then processes those requests, obtains the required materials from the vendor or supplier, and sends the relevant updates back to Maximo. As part of this process, purchase requisitions, PRs, and purchase orders, POs, are created. Vendor coordination takes place, materials are procured, and inventory replenishment is completed through OMS. This is how we achieve the complete end-to-end integration using Bob. Now, let's see how Bob helps us create the required APIs and automate this process. Let's see how we implemented this use case using Bob. The first step is establishing connectivity. We asked Bob to create an MCP server. To create the MCP server, we provide a project folder that contains a .env file. This env file includes all the Maximo connection details required for authentication and communication. After that, we ask Bob to register the MCP server and verify connectivity by executing a few API calls, such as retrieving purchase requisitions and running custom queries. This helps us confirm whether the Maximo connection is working correctly. As you can see, Bob is attempting to create the MCP server for our Maximo integration. It starts by examining the existing project folder and reviewing the .env configuration file. Once that analysis is complete, it proceeds to check the existing MCP server configuration. Although it may inspect multiple folders during the process, /Bob analyzes the existing configuration, builds the MCP server, creates the .env file within the server directory, registers the server, and validates connectivity using simple API calls. It also tests connectivity by executing custom queries. As part of the validation process, Bob performs GET API requests. The API tests are successful, and it retrieves purchase requisition records from Maximo. This confirms that the MCP server setup has been completed successfully. Bob reused the existing project, updated timeout configurations, generated the required env file, and successfully validated the connection through API calls and query execution. All of this was accomplished through a single prompt. Now that the connection has been established, let's see how we retrieve insufficient materials from Maximo and initiate the PR and PO creation process. Let us try to find insufficient materials, since the Maximo connection already exists, and we have created a custom Maximo integration mode. Bob understands which server to call and what information needs to be retrieved. Using this knowledge, it automatically examines Maximo inventory data and identifies insufficient materials. As a first step, Bob reviews the required product information. You can see that it has started retrieving insufficient materials. It executes the required Python-based queries against Maximo. Because it already understands the object structures and APIs available, it automatically determines which services need to be called. It applies the insufficient material business rule that was previously configured and retrieves the corresponding inventory records. Now we ask Bob to create an Excel report containing all the insufficient materials. Even though the prompt may not be perfectly written, Bob is still able to understand the intent and complete the task. Now I will go to my local system and create a folder called Bob Data inside the Documents directory and provide that location to Bob. My expectation is that Bob will generate an Excel file containing all the identified inventory shortages. The purpose of generating the Excel file is to verify whether the insufficient material information returned by Bob is accurate. Bob automatically writes the required Python logic and generates the spreadsheet using the retrieved data. As you can see, Bob successfully creates the Excel file. When we open the Bob data folder, we can see the generated spreadsheet containing all insufficient materials. This demonstrates how Bob can perform API calls, retrieve data from Maximo, and generate useful business reports within seconds. We can also validate the generated information directly within the Maximo application. For example, one of the items returned by Bob can be verified in Maximo Item Master and Inventory applications. We can confirm whether the business rule applied by Bob is accurate. As shown here, the inventory balance and reorder information indicate that replenishment is required, which matches the results generated by Bob. Next, let's see how connectivity to the OMS environment is established. On the left side, you can see a markdown file containing the OMS connection details. Using those credentials, Bob successfully connects to the OMS system. The next prerequisite is completing the organization setup within Sterling OMS. The items requested from Maximo must belong to an organization that exists within OMS. Therefore, we configure the required organizations in OMS before processing inventory requests. The same organizational structure used in Maximo is created within OMS. Here, we define the organization information, primary details, parent organization relationships, enterprise attributes, advanced attributes, organization themes, roles, and participation settings. These configurations ensure that OMS is prepared to process requests originating from Maximo. The next step is invoking the Manage Item tool. This tool is responsible for creating or maintaining the items requested by Maximo. The connection has already been established, and now we want to use OMS tools exposed through the MCP server. Because the MCP server contains multiple tools, Bob identifies and uses the appropriate one automatically. Bob creates and invokes the Manage Item method. Within this method, it processes all requested materials and performs the required OMS operations. It also generates additional supporting logic in the background. The Manage Item API is then executed against the appropriate organization. From there, OMS handles inventory processing, picking, shipping, and fulfillment activities. In summary, these are the materials requested by Maximo, and Bob automatically uses the Manage Item functionality to create and manage those items within Sterling OMS. The next step is inventory adjustment. Within the Markdown configuration file, we already have inventory adjustment logic generated by Bob. Bob reviews the adjust inventory configuration and executes the required inventory update operation, and we can see how Bob performed inventory adjustments within OMS. We will ask Bob to invoke the adjust inventory functionality for 100 units of the item Fire 100. Since we require at least 100 units in inventory, we instruct Bob to update the inventory accordingly. Since we requested an inventory adjustment, Bob automatically identifies the correct tool to invoke. It uses the Adjust Inventory tool and successfully updates the inventory quantity for Fire 100 based on the requested adjustment. Similarly, Bob performs inventory adjustments for the remaining items as well. It continues invoking the Adjust Inventory tool with the quantities specified in our request. Once all inventory updates are completed, Bob confirms that the inventory adjustment process has been executed successfully. Bob also generates a summary showing the inventory quantities that were updated. All inventory adjustments are performed automatically through Bob using its LLM-driven intelligence and tool orchestration capabilities. Next is to create orders in OMS. To accomplish order creation, we ask Bob to use the Create Order MCP tool. This tool is responsible for creating purchase orders in Sterling OMS that correspond to the purchase requisitions generated in Maximo. Bob begins using the Create Order tool. On the left side, we are also displaying the tool definition to provide visibility into how the implementation works behind the scenes. The tool ultimately calls the async create order method, which is responsible for creating the purchase order in Sterling OMS. These are the underlying technical operations being executed by Bob. The purchase order was successfully created using the MCP tool. The output includes the order number, order key, and document type. We can verify the same order directly within Sterling OMS by searching for the generated order number. Created order is further orchestrated to schedule and release status and pushed to Maximo. This demonstrates how efficiently Bob can create purchase orders through OMS integration. Next is receiving the items in Maximo. Now that the purchase order has been created and the purchasing details have been sent back to Maximo, we can proceed with the receiving process. For example, if we receive 10 additional items for a specific purchase order line, we can ask Bob to update the receiving information accordingly. The purchase order already exists, and we now want to record the receipt of additional materials. For example, we provide the following instruction. I have received 10 additional VS48 items from the vendor. Can you please receive these items? Using this prompt, Bob understands the business context and automatically creates the required material receipt transaction for the additional inventory. It then associates the receipt with the appropriate purchase order. Initially, Bob attempts to add the additional quantity to the existing purchase order. However, the system returns an error indicating that the original purchase order has already been fully received. Since the requested quantity has already been received against that purchase order, additional receipts cannot be processed against the same order. Bob correctly interprets the error and determines that a new purchase order must be created. Bob automatically creates a new purchase order and proceeds with the approval process. After approving the materials, we can go and check in receiving application of Maximo, and material receipts are yet to come. Now Bob generates those material receipts and updates into Maximo. The process includes requesting materials, replenishing inventory, creating orders, receiving items, and updating Maximo receiving records automatically. After refreshing the application, we can see that the inventory has been replenished successfully. This is how item replenishment is executed through OMS using Bob. I hope this demonstration provided a clear understanding of how Bob enables complete end-to-end integration and automation between Maximo and Sterling OMS.